Hey, Kate here with Wild Sacred Journey. So a couple days ago, I released a podcast episode partially in honor of this eclipse, this lunar eclipse and the shadowy moon in Pisces. That's also on shadow work. And since then, I've had a couple more thoughts, and particularly yesterday, I had a session with a client that was, that ended up including a lot of shadow work. And so I wanted to follow up with some more thoughts because this subject seems to be resonating with people right now. And so in the podcast episode, I talked about how shadow work is in many ways just a term for kind of the too wild, too feral, too much, quote unquote, parts of us that we sent to live outside of us for various reasons. And it's about the reclaiming and the bringing those back in. And that's true. And sometimes it actually looks more like shadow work being parts of us that actually we've sent to live deep inside of us, and we've really walled them off. We've put up so much armor and protection around them. And so those parts of us, there was some tender part of us that really, we're always going to want to protect the things that we love dearly, right? Or the things that mean a lot to us. And in many cases, the stuff that feels somehow deeply and inextricably intertwined with our sense of identity. So maybe we experienced a betrayal, maybe we experienced a loss or a threatened loss or a perceived loss of something we loved. Maybe there was criticism or careless words that we took to be criticism of some part of us that really matters to us, right? If someone insults you and it's like something you don't care about, like it's not a high value that you have, the insult just rolls off. You're just like, that was weird, But if someone insults you on something that matters to you deeply, if it really matters to you to think that you're trustworthy, and someone implies or outright says that they feel betrayed by you and you're not trustworthy, that's going to feel like significantly more of a blow than if someone says, how can you trust them? They don't like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, or whatever the thing is, which, fair enough, objectively, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is delicious, but I don't actually eat it myself, except occasionally I'll try a piece and be like, that is really tasty. But anyway, tangent. So, if someone insults something that you have no stake in that game, you're just weird, right? If someone insults against you in a area that you have a lot of stake in, it's gonna land much more deeply. Particularly then if it's someone you look up to or you respect, right? So in those moments, we feel like that actually feels like a threat, right? And what that is that it's because it's actually, being human is actually a really frail and vulnerable thing. Being alive is actually a really precarious thing in many ways. And so there's a part of us that I think is always kind of aware that we need to protect that, right? There's a part of us that knows that everything we love we're going to lose, right? And that's that idea that to be alive, we have to be able to hold grief and gratitude at the same time. So anytime that moment of that balance point between love and loss, right, gets really highlighted in a way that's beyond our current capacity, we're going to feel overwhelmed, and we're going to get reactive, and we're going to feel like we need to protect. Or anytime we feel like, something that matters deeply to us is under threat, we're going to need to protect. And so we armor up, and then we kind of set all these sort of preemptive patterns in place to try and avoid having to ever feel that way again, or giving anyone the power to hurt us that way again, or whatever the promise is, that we make to ourselves in that moment. And that's okay in that moment. But if we don't question it, then that continues. And if that continues long term, it actually ends up inhibiting our ability, maybe not to live, right? It's a survival mechanism. Survival mechanisms help us live, but it does inhibit our ability to be alive. And so I was sitting with that more, and what was coming to me is, armor protects us. Armor does not provide refuge. So in moments of threat, we need protection. to actually survive, we need places of refuge. And places of refuge are places where we can soften. Places of refuge are places where, without needing to fix anything, somehow repair becomes possible. Places of refuge are places where we trust we belong, we trust we're okay, where we can trust ourselves, where we can trust other people, where we can unmask, where we can be nourished in some kind of deeper way. Like, yes, maybe on the physical level, but also on the soul level, on the heart level, on the like sort of mythopoetic and cultural level. Yeah, so we need refuges, and I think we confuse protection with refuge. We confuse safety with sanctuary. And we end up then with a whole culture, a whole world of people who are constantly braced, armored up and braced, hypervigilant, trying to preemptively react to potential things that are actually responses to a past situation that they haven't actually processed and integrated, And while we may be picking up on something authentically here and now in the present that reminds us of the past, and that might be an accurate connection, oftentimes our response, our reaction in that moment may or may not be appropriate, or may or may not be either situationally appropriate or age appropriate. And so that's how we end up with sort of a future that looks like the past, is because we're always scanning the present for things that are like that past that we're trying to avoid ever going back to again. And so shadow work is the letting ourselves find those deeper places where we've been walled off, where we're armored up, where we've kind of set up this like, don't ever go here because it hurts too much and it's too big and it's too overwhelming and it's too scary. And going back to those in such a way that's in a way that's gentle, in a way that's compassionate, in a way that allows for repair, that allows for refuge and sanctuary to start to come in, because then that will actually free our capacity. That will allow our capacity to expand more, rather than keeping our capacity locked at the state that it was when that wound happened, when that fragmentation happened, that division happened, that walling and armoring happened. And the more we can kind of tend to those places within us, those shadowy places, the more we then have the capacity, and we can trust our own capacity to be responsive, which allows us to actually be more alive rather than reactive and armored. And, a lot of times people, my client yesterday, it's not that this was a repressed memory, and it's not that this was a memory they hadn't ever looked at or admitted it had hurt them at the time. They'd done those things. But there's a difference between looking directly at an issue, that like gaze that's sort of straight on, versus, the analogy of like looking at a web, right? A spider's web. So sometimes we can look at it straight on and see the whole thing. But sometimes, because of how the light is, we actually have to kind of crouch down and kind of look at it more from the side of our eye. We have to get to the right angle so that we can see the whole web. We can see all the ways that this armoring and this protection have rippled throughout our lives, and all the different places where it's kind of affected things. Because then we can see, wow, this thing that I thought was helping me is actually hurting me. And then it becomes easy to let go of. If we believe that it's necessary to our survival, we will never let go of it. So this is why, too, I think that analogy of the shadow works really well, because, shadows, they kind of happen at the corner of our eyes. They kind of, they flicker in and out. They're not the firelight. They're the casting of the light against a wall. They're kind of the sideways thing. We've got some excitement happening over there. So, yeah. So I'll leave this here for now. But yeah, you're welcome to let me know how this lands, or how these analogies and images are landing for you. Hopefully they kind of help illuminate something. And again, if there's, there's a reason too, because these are parts that we are even protecting ourselves against seeing in that moment. Often we need somebody else to kind of help us find that back door, that sideways kind of glance that's going to help us, that other perspective. We've already looked at them from our own perspective. Sometimes we need another perspective mirrored back to us in the form of somebody else to kind of help us get that sideways look that allows us to actually see and release the armor and the protection. Or sometimes we need to borrow somebody else's capacity for a little bit, because ours might be kind of limited around that subject. So having somebody else who can help hold the container, who has enough capacity in that moment, that can really help. And sometimes too, often those places were wounded because we didn't receive the witnessing we actually needed in that moment. And so part of the repair is being witnessed in a way that we weren't at the time, but needed. So this is why often this type of work is actually really important to do with somebody else. So I do have some one-on-one availability if that speaks to you at all. And then if this idea of sanctuary speaks to you, cohort of sanctuary. Next one is starting on September 29th. We run for 6 months. We meet once a month, the final Sunday of each month. So it'll be till the end of February. And it's a space of more refuge. So it's not necessarily, we're not intentionally doing deep shadow work there. That's not what that container is. But it is designed with this idea of where do we come, like needing places to come and soften and be together and receive that deeper nourishment, that soul nourishment, that mythopoetic nourishment, that nourishment of being able to maybe unmask and, sit with people and share and be witnessed. So if that speaks to you at all, there's more information. I'll put the link below, or you can find it through my bio. It's www.wildsacredjourney.com/sanctuary. If you're interested in one-on-one sessions, reach out to me, and we can talk more about that. So I hope you're well, and wishing you many blessings for this eclipse portal.